McCarthy, how are you, my friend?
I'm doing great, Mark. How are you?
I'm doing very, very well. By the way, the Washington Post has 10 reporters on the Denny Hastert story.
Yeah, and apparently the other media have followed suit. So nobody's around for whatever the Clintons are doing this weekend.
What the Clintons are doing, and they never had 10 reporters on the allegations of rape against Bill Clinton, did they?
No, they certainly didn't. Be nice if they could put a couple of reporters on the missing emails, but
yeah, right. Andy McCarthy, you have a wonderful, what we call Encounter Broadside, which is these are almost like Thomas Paine pamphlets on these various subjects that you write. And on this one, and you can get it, folks, on Amazon.com, is entitled Islam and Free Speech. I read it. It's magnificent. It caught my attention, particularly when we see what's going on with Pamela Geller and so forth and so on. First of all, what motivated you to write this? And secondly, what do you think about what's going on, how we self-censor in this country?
Well, I was motivated, Mark, by the fact that it really was the Charlie Hebdo massacre in Paris. I've been writing for a number of years on the topic of Sharia law, that's Islam's really societal framework and legal code. And in particular, I've been focused on the repression it does on free speech and how foolish it is to try to assimilate Sharia law with American law, particularly the Bill of Rights, particularly the First Amendment.
But Andy McCarthy, it's fundamentally impossible, isn't it?
It's completely impossible. They're antithetical. And, you know, they essentially have to be, because we are, as the framers understood it, a liberty culture. And the idea is that you unleash the ingenuity of free people with as little interference as possible from the government. And Islamic society, and I don't mean this as a shot at them, it's simply a fact. It's an authoritarian culture because their understanding is that Allah has given mankind Sharia, which is the perfect pathway and framework for living a flourishing human life, and they therefore consider any deviation from Sharia to be a profound offense.
So it's not just a faith, but this is a governing requirement.
That's exactly right. They don't recognize in this classical interpretation of Sharia, which Islamic supremacists follow, they don't recognize any division between mosque and civil society, between what we call church and state.
Mm-hmm. And so the timing of this was as a result of what? Writing
the timing of the pamphlet was the reaction to the Charlie Hebdo massacre, which I found to be really provocative in the sense that not only was it a terrible atrocity, but you had a pouring out into the streets of a lot of people who represented themselves as friends of free expression, who in fact have been really antagonistic to free expression and have been a big part of the problem that we have in terms of the attrition of our free speech rights confronted by Sharia repression standards.
Now, while your focus on this wonderful little pamphlet is on what took place in Paris, as you point out, let's project what's going on in this country today.
Right.
You don't have to agree with everything Pamela Geller does or how she does it, but the fact of the matter is the big media just jumped her when they were trying to do what Americans do all the time. We get together, maybe we'll mock somebody, maybe we won't, but why in the world should we in the United States fear drawing cartoons of Muhammad?
No, that's exactly right, and I'll say this for Pam, regardless of what you think of her and her style, she's calling attention to a problem that gets absolutely...
I think she's a hero, to be perfectly honest with you.
With respect to this, and look at this comparison. She arranges this event in Garland, where jihadists predictably attack it, and in most of the media, she becomes the story rather than the Islamic supremacist ideology that induces these jihadists to try to commit a Paris-like atrocity in the place. In the meantime, our own State Department colludes with 57 Muslim governments, known as the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, on a United Nations human rights resolution that basically repeals the First Amendment. And this is done under the State Department stewardship.
Wait a minute. Hold on now. This is news to me. When did this happen?
This happened it was negotiated from 2009 forward, and I believe it was late 2011, early 2012. But it's called Resolution 1618, and it would make illegal any expression that incites hostility to religion. And, of course, there's only one religion that they're actually concerned about here. But this is an ongoing negotiation. The Obama administration began it in the earliest days of the president's first term. It was done under Mrs. Clinton's supervision, and it cannot coexist with our First Amendment. And yet, there you have it. You have our own government colluding in this. You haven't heard about it because there's been no coverage of that story, yet Tam Geller is a story.
This is amazing to me. Now, you say we're still negotiating this. Is there a point at which...
No. It was passed.
It was passed by whom?
By the United Nations Human Rights Council.
And we signed up. We voted yes?
We were the sponsor. We helped write it.
So we helped eviscerate our First Amendment?
Yeah, and it gets worse than that, Mark. Mrs. Clinton, of course, understands that this is completely antithetical to the First Amendment, and she therefore realizes that it's a legal problem. So in yet another speech, what she said was, if we can't make the law work to enforce this, we'll have to resort to old-fashioned methods of peer pressure and shaming. So we're not talking here now about, a community enforcing society's own standards. We're talking about the United States government using extra-legal, extortionate pressure tactics because they have essentially signed on to a resolution that blatantly violates the First Amendment, and the only way they will be able to carry it off is by putting pressure on people not to engage in the kind of speech that they disapprove of. And after she made that speech, lo and behold, what happens in connection with the Benghazi massacre? With respect to that producer of the video that they fraudulently blamed for the massacre, they trumped up a prosecution against the producer for essentially exercising his First Amendment rights.
Andy McCarthy, it is frightening, it's disgusting, it's so infuriating. Let me ask you a question. Is there anybody in the Republican leadership even talking about trying to take steps to address this?
I don't think so, Mark. I think, there has been...
I'm frustrated at myself, Andy, quite frankly, for not knowing about this, but go ahead.
I think that, when it comes to Islam, the Republicans seem to treat it like a third rail. I think there was an analogous issue, which I know you talked about a good deal about, that didn't implicate Islam, but was an attempt by Democrats to essentially repeal the First Amendment under the auspices of campaign finance reform. Remember, they're going to have some committee that was going to pass on whether you could put content out. And I think that in that connection, Senator Cruz, I thought very cleverly, proposed as an amendment to that legislation the text of the First Amendment. And it turned out that every Democrat voted against.
I remember that.
And so, I wish they had done something like this with this resolution, and I certainly think it needs to be given a lot more attention than it's gotten. Because, look, this is Mrs. Clinton. This is where she's coming from. Mm-hmm. You would think that they would want to call attention to that, and they just haven't.
Andy McCarthy, you are a national treasure. I appreciate it. Islam and free speech. People want to get this, they can get it at Amazon, right?
Yep, that's right. Or they can go to Encounter Books website. At Encounter Books, you can read about the whole Broadside series. There's a lot of awfully good conservative thinkers who've written. I think I'm like the the 42nd pamphlet in the series. I've written about 3 of them, but it's really a terrific series, and I'm proud to be part of it.
Actually, you're number 42. It's right here on the cover. But who's counting?
You thought they retired number 40. Right?
That's right, didn't they?
Yes, Jackie Robinson's number.
Yes.
He retired. I'll have to tell Roger Kimball. He must have screwed up on that one.
Just so everybody knows, you're a big Mets guy.
I am, yeah, and we don't have any number 42s, I assure you.
No, but they're playing a hell of a season. I'm not even really able to talk about it. You know, they're on another station.
Right.
Islam and free speech, Andrew C. McCarthy, the smartest guy on all this stuff you can possibly imagine. Amazon.com, Encounter Broadside. Have a wonderful weekend, brother.
Thanks, Mark. Thanks for doing this.
All right, take care. Very